A warm welcome. We might start today's session just so that we can get through the amount of information that we've got to share with you, our guests. Welcome to you all to this collaborative seminar between ACBC Victoria and the CSIRO for our Australia-China Science Series. And we're looking at the complementarities between our two nations in the field of science. 2020, of course, has been a year like no other. I certainly don't need to tell you that. Bushfires, floods, COVID are just some of the prominent issues facing our everyday existence that have led to some of the world's worst global economic situations in decades. For today's online seminar, we're zooming in on building drought resilience. Both Australia and China have drought as a major national hazard and growing challenge as demand for water rises and climate changes. Consequential drought disasters bring with them considerable social, economic and ecological losses. In Australia, for example, according to the Australian Bureau of Agricultural and Resources, Economics and Sciences, farming profits took a dive in 2019 and were down by a quarter, with output falling by 8%. And it's estimated this cut the GDP by around $12 billion. A 2019 economic assessment study by Chinese scientists also found that economic losses caused by drought in China may double if global temperature rises between 1.5 degrees Celsius to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And of course, there'll be a resulting increase in drought intensity across China through that. So what can be done? To help answer that question today, we have a world-leading panel in research and industry to provide insights on how we can work to mitigate the adverse effects of drought. To provide us with updates on CSIRO initiatives and research done in this area, we welcome Jean-Philippe Raoul and Dr. Anne Ray. Anne will also be our expert moderator during Q&A. Jean-Philippe is a principal research scientist and team leader in the Crop New Market Quality Group of CSIRO Agriculture and Food. Over the past 6 years, his research has focused on aspects of cereal starch degradation during grain development and germination, and how crops deal with energy partitioning between starch, non-starch, and oil. Dr. Ray joined CSIRO Agriculture and Food in 1994 and is currently group leader in Resilient Crop Arm. Their work enables sustainable and profitable agriculture by delivering innovative crop breeding and management technologies. Joining our session today is Bruce Rogerson. Bruce is the founding director and CEO of Rubicon Water, who deliver and maintain innovative technology solutions that increase water use, efficiency and reliability to support sustainable global food and fibre production. And finally, we have Dr. Fouad Abo, Senior Technical Director at GHT, who are committed to solving the world's biggest challenges in the areas of water, energy and urbanisation. And I'm pleased to welcome these 4 experts from their fields from 3 highly valued ACBC member companies. We'll shortly hear from our speakers and then move to a Q&A session. We've received some pre-submitted questions, but are happy to take additional ones if you would add those to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. A reminder too that this event is being recorded and will be made available on the ACBC website in the Member Insights Centre after the event. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Jean-Philippe to lead off the presentations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Virginia. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, ACBC, for giving me the opportunity to talk about this very important topic. As I'm the first speaker, I would like also to take the opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owner of the land that we are meeting on today. In my case, I'm in Canberra, so that's the Ngunnawal and Ngungurri people. And I would like to present my respect to the elder, past, present, and emerging. Thank you very much. Can I get the slide, please? Thank you very much. So what I was going to do first is to give you a quick snapshot of CSIRO and what we're doing. Thank you very much. So we are the National Research Agency, and we can see we have over 5,500 dedicated people across the world. as an interesting fact, 35% of the staff are born outside of Australia, and we're able to speak over 70 different languages. One of them born outside of Australia is speaking to you as now. We have international sites, 8 international sites across 6 countries with global engagement with USA, Chile, France, Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, and I know China is also on the list and gonna come soon. Can I get the next slide, please? So we are focused on solving the greatest challenges, and we are focusing on the issues that matter the most for quality of life, for the economy of the environments. And CSIRO has identified 6 core national challenges that we are actually assisting the country to overcome. So these challenges include improving health, developing industry, securing food, and protecting the environment. I might take just few minutes to talk about 2 that are very close to my heart, and one is the food security. And to tackle food security, we're growing specialized crop. As an example, like the gluten-free barley that we develop in our group to meet changing dietary needs. And also another example is the insect protecting cowpeas to boost crop yield in arid region like sub-Saharan Africa. The other one as well that's very much in the topic of today is resilient and valuable environments. So we're building multidisciplinary teams around complex ecosystem. I mean, like the Great Barrier Reef is one of them, and also the Murray-Darling River Basin. In order to solve these challenges, we are embarking in missions. They are major scientific and collaborative research programs that aim at making significant impact. Can I get the next slide, please? Thank you. So one of the mission is a mission directed toward drought resilience. We want to address the need to create a more resilient and vibrant rural sector and environment in the face of an increasingly challenging climate. And Virginia mentioned it a little bit, but I mean, this year has been very just particular year in terms of climate. Climate extremes such as droughts, flood, heat wave, and frost. They are perennial but variable feature of the Australian land. And there's a lot of prediction that these extremes will increase in frequency and severity. I mean, as I mentioned, I mean, last year everybody just has in mind the drought that's severely impacting agriculture in Australia, and actually there has been several years where drought is striking agriculture, and also, I mean, no mentioning the bushfire that ravaged Australia no later than last Christmas. And you can see that this kind of extreme temperature changes will occur more likely in the future. We've got here one of the prediction map of maximum temperature in the Australian winter CSIRO region. And what you can see comparison to the top graph where the temperature, we could see the temperature from the 70s, 80s, compared to the 2000 and the millennium of drought. There was a significant shift towards this hotter temperature. And the prediction that was made for 2021 to 2050 tend to show that this increase in temperature is more likely to occur. Can I get the next slide, please? So while the farmers are successfully adapted to the climate variability so far, I mean, data show that significant reduction in profitability of Australian farms is associated with low rainfall years. And that's one of the issues that the mission, the drought resilience mission, wants to tackle. I'll give you one of these example of these particular issues that the drought resilience mission wants to tackle. If you look at the top right corner, you see a map of New South Wales, and there's an indication of rural towns that were close to or actually run out of water in 2019, 2020. So you imagine, I mean, there's all the economy and all the stress related to actually the running out of water for those towns. We're talking about, well, agriculture is severely impacted, of course, but it's all the economy and industry around that town as well that is actually just severely impacted. And you can imagine all the social economical stress that this shortage of water is causing. So one of the examples of where the CSIRO mission was involved is actually using resources to identify aquifer within the Murray-Darling basins. So aquifer are actually just underground layer of water-bearing permeable rocks. They're a little bit like natural water tank. And you can see this area of aquifers are highlighted in green in the central map. So those have been identified as potential storage water in wet year that could be extracted and retrieved in drought years. So what the next step for the project is actually just working with regional agency toward a pilot process to see where we could extract the water from this aquifer. So in order to solve this problem, I mean, CSIRO is developing capability with a good broad range of business unit. We got agriculture and food, land and water, health and biosecurity, ocean and atmosphere, and data 61. All our core business unit working together end to end in order to tackle these challenges. But of course, I mean, we just realized that we cannot do that on our own as well, and we're looking at your partner, both nationally and internationally. We're looking at actually just partner that had faced drought, like Australia, or a climate extreme, and what we want to do is sharing ideas, sharing solution with different partners, both nationally and internationally. Can I get the next slide, please? And of course, one of the partner of choice on the science level is China, and actually two of the main institutions, the Chinese Academy of Science, or CAAS, and the Chinese Agriculture Academy of Science, CAAS. We've got a long-lasting relationship with CAAS. It's over 40 years relationship that we have built with CAAS, and I think the first official project with Chinese Academy of Science was in 1975. It's a great year, the year I was born, but just tell you how long is the actual relationship with CAAS. 2018, we had about 170 co-publications with CAAS. We're working across a lot of strategic areas in agriculture, health, climate change, nanotechnology, and marine science. And one of the example I would like to highlight is the project that was funded and in partnership with CAAS that involved Professor Jing A. Chun from CAAS and Dr. Zvi Oshman from CSIRO, where they're actually working on improving crop yield potential under water and climatic constraint. So this type of project that we're building, and the objective was to investigate yield gap of crop ecosystem. So focusing on crop ecosystem rather than individual crop, and to develop, to try to define what is the best crop combination under different environments, under different climate change scenario, and under different irrigation strategy. So that was one of the projects. Can we get the next slide, please? So second very similar type of project that we're building with Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences as well. And that project is led by Dr. Emily Wang from CSIRO. Is working to develop database for the North China Plain. And the idea is to define scientific benchmark for sustainable agricultural intensification and identify opportunity to increase crop yield. Next slide, please. I think those are actually just only two snapshots, very brief snapshot of the type of collaboration that we're doing with CAAS and CAAS. I could go on and on for a much longer time, but I think I'm already running out of time. So I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity to highlight and showcase the science that we're doing between China and CSIRO. and I'll stay open for question in the Q&A later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. That was very interesting, and I think particularly it's heartening to see the collaborations between the Chinese Academy of Science and the Academy of Agricultural Sciences, because obviously there's such combined interest, and working together is obviously a better way to move ahead. If I could now just call on our next speaker, I think it's Bruce. Are we up to Bruce from Rubicon Water? And he'll take us through some of the work that he's doing as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia. Yeah. So at Rubicon Water, our business is about optimising the supply and efficiency of agricultural water. And what I want to talk about today is the opportunity that exists in to really solve a lot of the food production crisis that's coming with climate change and population growth, by better use and distribution of agricultural water. Could I have the next slide, please? So obviously, the population is growing hugely, 10 billion people by 2050, and a big skew in food demand towards resource-intensive meat, fish, and dairy products is seeing a huge demand on water, which leads to the next slide, if I could. So this is modelling by the World Water Resources Institute, which shows that on current projections, the world needs to produce 56% more food and fibre by the year 2050. So these are huge numbers, and that all leads to what those constraints, the constraints on that and on that food production is. So if I could move to the next slide. Obviously, climate change, as was spoken about, the change in climate is really creating a lot of challenges around availability of water resources and desertification of viable agricultural land, land availability itself. So for agriculture, we need land, and the demands on the availability of land is having an impact as well. The key one for us is water scarcity. Water's, living in Australia, water is hugely valuable resource, and it's under stress all around the world. And you add to that the competition for water resources, as the population grows, household, industrial demand, and other demands for water all really increase the pressure. So if I could move to the next slide. So given all that, as we sit at the moment, 70% of the world's freshwater withdrawals are used for agriculture. So that's the vast majority. This is the current the state. So 70% of that, and then flicking quickly to the next slide. Of that 70%, 71% of that is surface water. So surface water is water that comes, that is diverted from rivers and stored in dams, as opposed to groundwater and other. So that's effectively 70% of the world's water, and 70% of that, so it's roughly half the world's water, is used for agriculture. That's coming from dams and rivers and being distributed to farms. I could move to the next slide. And then you get to how is that water being applied to crops? So in a modern environment like Australia, and the US, particularly in places of Europe's, micro irrigation and drippers and sprinklers are getting widely deployed. But 70% of the world's irrigation is still flood irrigation. So certainly in the developing world, it's the predominant one. And the key thing with flood irrigation is in the existing infrastructure, those systems are laid out for flood. So they're not there's a huge amount of land forming required to move to sprinkler irrigation in a lot of cases and micro irrigation. So the logistics are moving away from flood and the economies are moving away from flood are very difficult. And there is a lot of technology now. So we've been working for some time now on precision flood irrigation techniques. So utilising latest technology and science to be able to apply flood irrigation much more efficiently, and that's having big benefits. But there's still the majority of the flood irrigation that needs treatment. And if I could move to the next slide. So dealing with that surface irrigation. So this diagram here shows, we've typically got points of storage in the catchments. Additional storage is one method of addressing the water storage, the water shortage problems. But more and more around the world, the opportunities for additional storage have been are being eliminated. The viable dam sites typically all around the world have already been built. So there's not a huge windfall to be gained in building more storages to solve this problem. So I'll focus on, the efficiency from those dams through the river systems into man-made canal networks and pipe networks to deliver water to a farm, and then the application of that water on farm to maximise agricultural production. If I could go to the next slide. So one of the stark statistics here is that if you look at the water released from a point of storage in these surface systems for a crop that is not used by a crop, it's roughly 63% of the water that leaves the dam targeted to get to a crop is not actually required by that crop, and the majority of that is not used by the crop. So this is a huge opportunity. If we, again, in these surface areas, we are talking about 50% of the world's freshwater withdrawals are being used at an efficiency of approximately 37%. So if I could, next slide, please. So the first part of that, there's roughly 3 levels here of 3 parts where that inefficiency occurs. The first part is distribution. So if you're, getting from releasing water from that dam and getting it to the farm gate. These are typically, natural water courses and man-made canal systems that are in various states of disrepair, and even the well-maintained ones are difficult to manage. So what we have now shown with the systems that we're working in around the world, applying world's best technology to those and software systems, demand management from the farmers, and automating the systems to match supply with demand, we've taken distribution efficiencies in the districts we're working with from 50 to 70% efficient to 90% efficient when they're run properly. So that first slice there, you can get a really significant part of that water savings back by automating that water distribution system and applying technology. The second one, which again is about 1/3 of that loss, is scheduling. So utilising technology to really understand your crop science and when and what amount to apply to maximise your food productivity, your crop productivity. So it's a key element, and if you and the technology is really moving in that area with satellite imagery, low-cost weather stations now that can be deployed to get localised environmental conditions. There's a lot of technology happening in that area. And the final one is application then, which is where a lot of people focus when they think of irrigation, but it's actually the final stage in the sequence. So again, moving away from inefficient flood irrigation to efficient flood irrigation, precision flood irrigation, or drips and sprinklers really does solve a lot of that problem. So if you could move, there's another little animation there. If you next one, I think, Madison, thanks. Now the key feature with all these things is they are sequential. So you can have the best application technology on a farm in a surface water gravity irrigation district, but it doesn't mean much unless you've got the scheduling technology to know, so you can have a fancy dripper and sprinkler system. You need the scheduling technology to be able to know exactly what water to apply at what time and in what volume to maximize your production. But then in these systems, which are sometimes, we'll quote our biggest customer here in Australia, Golden Murray Water, 6,500 kilometres of man-made canal the water has to transit through from the point of storage through to the farm gate. If you don't have water on demand in these networks being delivered at the point, at the time that it's required and in the volume required reliably for the farms, then there's no point having irrigation scheduling and there's no point having application efficiency on farm. But pulling all this together in that sequential way, which is the approach that we have performed here in Australia and is increasingly happening all around the world, automate the distribution networks, apply the best available technology for irrigation scheduling, and then really efficient application systems, then there's a huge windfall to be made here. The whole Murray-Darling Basin development at the water efficiencies that have been done through the Murray-Darling Basin Plan have been focused pretty much on that distribution first 30%. Some of these other, the next sequential savings will be equally as big and should be a lot cheaper to achieve. So next slide, thank you. So yeah, just to sum up from Rubicon, our business is about delivering value to governments and water managers and farmers, improve water use efficiency, create globally competitive farmers, and maximize the productivity out of what is a scarce and very valuable water resource. So thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. That was very interesting, and it's actually heartening to see that Australia's leading the way with our technology in relation to that worldwide. And it's interesting also that the 56% increase in production is needed, and it is a nice segue into an event that we're doing in February with CSIRO on sort of avoiding wastage in food production and looking at alternate protein sources. So anyone who's zoomed in today's meeting might like to keep an eye out for our February event with CSIRO. So without further ado, now I'd like to move now on to Fouad Abo from GHD, and he will take you through his presentation. Thanks, Fouad.
Thank you very much, Virginia. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for listening to us. I also would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as the traditional owners and custodian of the land that we live in, and pay my respect to their elder past, emerging and present. So into my presentation, I guess I'll try to do my presentation in a way that it's sort of, complement what John, Philip and Bruce were talking about. And I'm focusing on the soil, I guess, because the soil is where everything is happening. Both John, Philip and Bruce were talking about the water and the crops, but we do need the soil where everything is growing. So it is the living of our planet. So can I have the next slide, please? So just, I guess, to set the scene on this, the drought, obviously, it's a huge worldwide problem. Just as an example, I guess, concerning the two countries we're focusing in here, China and Australia. In Australia alone, the drought has caused the national GDP to drop by about 0.75% or $12 billion over the drought period. And that's, I think, was between 2006 and 2015. In China, obviously bigger economy, drought has caused China economy a loss of a staggering $17 billion per year, and that's an average between 2006 to 2015. So a huge amount, obviously, due to this drought. And I guess, like John, Philippe and Bruce were saying, this climate change, this constant increase of temperature are causing a lot of trouble in our environment. and our fragile soil. So both in Australia and China, we do have fragile soil that they're not rich in organic matter, they're not rich in nutrient, and they are quite susceptible to erosion. I guess, just another point about the erosion, with this changing climate and increasing drought, obviously we are facing a lot of increase in population, food requirement, like Jean-Philippe and Bruce were talking about. And as a consequence of this climate change, it is quite well known that the estimation of global soil being degraded is about 33%. So a staggering number in terms of, the impact that we're seeing. And just, I guess, to put it in the context for our audience, for even 5 centimeters of soil to be developed through the pedogenesis process, it takes tenths and tenths of thousands of years. So it is really sort of important to look at it from that perspective when we lose and erode our soil. So next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of, I guess, how we can deal with soil drought and make it resilient to face this problem that we're having. So obviously the soil does need the water not only to stay productive, but it does say to stay active and abundant. We probably all know that the soil has a lot of living organisms to keep it going, and which make the water fundamental for the soil and consequently for the planet. So soil health practice consequently are very important, as a proper practice would increase the organic matter, and organic matter not only increase the capacity to store water, and those were talking about, the importance of using efficiently the water. So unless that the soil can store the water and make it available to the plant and its own life, our soil will not be drought resilient. So it's quite important to be mindful of that. The good management of carbon flow is critical for long-term and good drought resilient for our soil. And we have done quite a few projects about that sort of carbon flow in soil in China, actually. And it was also for the greenhouse office. We've done it with Melbourne University at the time, and indicated the importance of keeping that carbon flow in soil so that our soil are healthy, but also capturing, another greenhouse, which is the CO2. So this good management obviously have an effect on soil water, which drives then many of production benefit, and hence the soil health practice, such as a number of different practices, obviously, but I'm just quoting a couple of them here, saying no-till, and also improve grazing and crop rotation. Jean-Philippe spoke about the different crop, and it is an important aspect of how you keep your soil resilient is to choose the right crop, because obviously the root system, the evapotranspiration, the foliage surface, the plant species, they do play a crucial role on adaptation to drought. So next slide, please. So we can, again, build that soil drought resilience. As I mentioned before, Australian soil are generally not rich in organic matter and have not been through the proper pedogenesis in there. Therefore, by nature, our soil are not drought resilient, so therefore the management is quite important. The option of adapting through a proper choice of crops is become consequently viable option in most part of Australia and China. Next slide, please. So just, I guess, some idea about how we build soil drought resilience. We do need, I think it's agreed that we do need a multifaceted and integrated decision-making tree to come up with soil drought resilience strategy. And it is generally acceptable that a two-tiered soil health plan is needed. The first one is an emergency action. So when you face something all of a sudden, and a lot of those climate change are these days quite random, so we need to get ready. But ultimately, we do need the long term to drought-proof our soil. In order for us to build soil health for drought, we do, as I mentioned before, we have to be careful about choosing the plant. Always local plant, native plant that they have over the millions of years, I dare saying, develop that adaptation with the soil, with the climate, with the weather that we live in. So it is important to acknowledge that. And I guess there are a lot of research that they do in engineering genetic to combine the adaptation with productive crops as well. So I guess, just to sum it up, the resilience of our living soil will decide the resilience of our future. I'm one of those. I have no doubt that without that, this planet, we can't continue to survive, especially to face what Bruce was saying about, the increased population back to 10 billion in 2050 and increased food production. So it is important that I think all of us be conscious of that and practice it in our behavior. Next slide, please. So just a bit of conclusion, I guess, in terms of the bigger picture for drought resilience. As I mentioned before, an integrated multidisciplinary planning is important, and that need to include increased soil cover to minimize the loss of humidity and loss of water from soil, increase the water efficiency that Bruce was talking about, reduce the loss of pasture. In Australia and in China, we have a lot of loss in this area. And we do need to have that integrated crop, livestock, and forestry system together to survive what we're facing. So I guess, just to finish in a positive note, building soil health for drought, choose plant carefully, all of these kind of things are quite important. But it is worth mentioning that Australia has commissioned a study to investigate the natural resource management strategy, and it would appear that this strategy will most likely improve the drought resilience. And I guess a plug for CSIRO, they do have developed a range of technology to improve drought resilience. And China also has the Adapting to Climate Change in China program, trying to face that. And this photo it's actually, just want to spend 30 seconds on this photo because it is part of a project that I've done years ago in China about the river basin in China. And as you can see, the top north of China has a high scarcity of water. However, the population there is quite dense, as obviously everywhere in China, probably fair to say. But I do recall at the time when I was in a big meeting with, the hierarchy of the Chinese Minister of Water Resources, saying to them, part of the strategy should be really that you need to adapt the population density in accordance with the resource that you have in that part of the world. So it's a long-term strategy, which apply to everything else, obviously. So it is quite important to be mindful of what we have and how we can live in our planet. And before I conclude, I'll probably spend just a minute in talking about some of the projects I've done in China. I mentioned this one. I've done project actually since 1999 in China, and one project that stayed for me until these days was the project strategic cooperation between China and Mongolia, which include the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region of China, which I really sort of spent 4 weeks there trying to look at the problem there. And at the time, actually, I recall, Jean-Philippe, and that there was a research station for CSIRO to study those crops type of thing as well. And it was heartening to see, you know, the poor farmer there struggling to get a drop of water to really sort of, you know, meet end day need really type of thing. So, and we try to look at different way of protecting them by giving them the mean in terms of technology that Bruce, Jean-Philippe were talking about, you know, how we can make their life easier long term, not only short term. So we've done project in Datong region about drought resilient. I've done flood management plan in the Hunan province. And you come across this problem everywhere you go. So I guess, you know, that's sort of, you know, an important aspect of trying to get the audience engaged on really important to participate on how we can keep our planet living. So, and the last slide, Madison, is just a plug for GHD. I guess, you know, we've been in business for more than 90 years. Proud to say it's a Melbourneian company growing to over 10,000 people around the world. We have done project in everywhere in the world. So thanks for listening, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Fuad. It's very interesting to know that you have been working with China since 1999, and that longevity of the relationships is really very, very important. I'd really like now to call on Dr. Anne Ray, to moderate the panel discussion. We have a few questions coming in, pre-submitted, and please don't hesitate to keep sending them into the Q&A box. So Anne, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia. Yes, we've got a number of interesting questions. I've got a couple here that were pre-submitted, and I might start with those. So panelists, I'll toss the question to you, but please feel free, if you have other comments to add, please jump into the conversation. So the first one was submitted before the session started, and it's asking about the level of cooperation between Australia and China on water and environmental management. So the question is asking about what's the current level of collaboration and what might be the opportunities where we can do more. So Bruce, I noticed that you mentioned projects with China. Would you like to start with that one?
Yeah. So yeah, we've got a, you know, China is a big part of our business, and I suppose we've been doing work in China since 2008. And, you know, I suppose that's our entry to China is a good example of the cooperation working. So there's a group within China, Ministry of Water Resources, called CIDDC, so China Irrigation and Drainage Development Corporation. And that part of that group was charged with really looking at what's the best available technology around the world that could assist China in their water management. So that was our entry point in partnering with them. And, you know, and also through academia. So we, you know, our research partners are Melbourne University. You know, they co-own a lot of our IP in terms of the developments we've made. And we have a similar relationship with Tsinghua University in China. And in our Gansu JV, Melbourne University and Tsinghua together with us, and the Water Resource Department of Gansu is there. So I suppose is together in, you know, working on projects. So I see at our business level, I see a huge amount of cooperation of good people on both sides, looking at, you know, how we can bring the technology together and develop solutions. There's a lot of learnings. There's a lot of equivalence between the Murray-Darling Basin problems and the Yellow River problems in the north of China. And at a working, you know, business level, I see the cooperation working very well.
Yeah, that's excellent. How could we increase that? What could we do to make that great, larger, more widespread, to get more people involved?
Yeah, I think the challenge is in the business world, I suppose, of being brave enough to make the investments, which is a bit loss leading to get into these markets. And so with a lot of companies, that's a challenge. I think probably promoting the successes and the opportunities. Everyone's frightened about, you know, everyone hears the horror stories in China around IP theft and that, you know, Western companies getting, getting robbed of their IP, and that's that hasn't been our experience. That sort of stuff has happened, but I suppose what we've seen is that the quality relationships are there, the technology that works has a place, and you know, we have seen, you know, we've been there over 10 years in a growing business. So I think promoting those successes more so than the horror stories would go a long way.
Yeah, what you're describing is a genuine co-creation of value, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Can I just add a quick one in terms of that cooperation that Bruce answered? There has been and continue to be a lot of cooperation between China and Australia in terms of the climate change, environment, and others. And as an example, GHD has conducted a project called ACDEP, which is Australia-China Environmental Development and Cooperation, which was financed actually by Australia, and it was quite a big project, tens and tens of millions. And we've done that project, that cover, and just opened the history of it. Water resource management, it covered integrated river basin management, pollution management, public participation even, getting the people behavior changing on that, climate change in a whole, wetland management. So, and we have developed even a lot of brochure, a lot of guideline for the Environment Protection Ministry in China for this kind of thing. We have done project to develop soil contamination guideline for China. So that sort of cooperation is continual. And I guess Jean-Philippe and you know better than me, CSIRO is one of the organizations that it's really respected in China, and that sort of cooperation. We work with you guys in a couple of projects over there and other academic as well. Melbourne University I mentioned as well. So hopefully we can continue that. But
that's useful, thank you. It actually goes to one of the other questions that was sent to us ahead of the session, which is about creating practice change. And we know that that can be slow, and I'm interested in your thoughts about what you think are the roadblocks. So is it economic? Is it about the value? Is it cultural? Is it about setting policy? Where do you think are the roadblocks to creating practice change, and where could we intervene?
I'm happy to start with that. Based on my experience and really sort of, you know, first hand, there are a number of impediments that I witness as challenges on those projects. One of them is behavioral change. People, I mean, we all sort of creature habit we have in our behavior, and people are used to certain things. And I guess when tough time hit, those challenges surface, and we need to. So I think, you know, at the start, I had that combative mentality saying, we need to change that today, you know, we need to do it now. But you realize that you need to work with incremental changes, especially on behavior. Behavior is very important. Without changing behavior, I think we're kidding ourselves that we're going to implement a lot of changes and long-term changes. So change behavior require that sort of, you know, patience. And I guess as some of the means we developed, you know, on that public participation on this project ACDEP was develop brochures, even run media campaign. So you can hit people on their house, you know, when they sit around the kitchen table, when they sit around their meal and watch the media and listen to the media, that's where you make these changes. And we have set some monitoring gauge as well to assess that behavior change over about 10 years, actually, just to see what's happening. So yeah, and I think it's fair to say people in certain countries have certain way of thinking as well, and that influence their behavior from a number of perspectives, whether it's political or social or culture, all of these kinds of things. So we need to be mindful of those aspects in order of really understand them, so we can be a good listener and then obviously engage with our audience. which was a big challenge for us, because a lot of them say, "Oh, we've done that." Saying, this is
so all
what
the
it
more
is about.
All the more reason to have a deep partnership and an atmosphere of trust and cooperation, I guess, so that you can actually implement the scientific advances.
Absolutely.
Look, I've got one to toss to Jean-Philippe here. A more specific question about CSIRO, and what companies is CSIRO working with in areas such as crop sciences? What are the main partners that CSIRO is collaborating with there? So we've heard your description about the collaboration with the Chinese Academy of Sciences and the Agricultural Sciences Academy as well. What about working with companies more directly?
I mean, we've got a lot of company partner. I mean, we're looking. I mean, within the relationship with CSIRO and China in particularly, there's been a major switch toward the CSIRO CAAS relationship that we're talking about. I mean, it's been very successful on the science level for 40 years, and we have funded projects, probably 12 to 15 funded projects every year with CAAS and CAAS on different topics. And the last year, there's been a massive shift as well. We're looking at welcoming third party and industry as well. So both from China and Australia. So looking at numerous partners, could be universities. So we've got a lot of universities partner in both in China and in Australia. Grain company in both in China and Australia, and manufacturer as well. So we are developing and opening our relationship and collaboration both in Australia. So
that's a strong theme that's coming through actually, is that the multi-party partnership with a common purpose.
Absolutely. I mean, we understand as well that, I mean, if you want the things to get moving forward as well, we need to understand as well the industry partner and what they need. So it's a tripartite really.
Thank you. Virginia, can I take a couple more minutes for some questions?
Yes. Yeah,
I'd like to answer them if we can. Thank you. Great. So look, there's a question that's probably for all of our panelists here about what sorts of gaps might you see in vocational and skills? Are there gaps that we need to be filling to make to make this kind of system and application work better? And the questioner is asking really because there are sources that we could partner with to improve the capability that we have to apply to these needs. So are there gaps that you see in the skills available, the people?
Yeah. Well, certainly at the practical level in the field, both in Australia, but China, India, the places we're working, as the farmers are moving, getting access to an available water resource when they need it, and I think this goes to change that the change of behaviour. The question before as well. It's very hard for a farmer in Ningxia in China to change his agricultural practices when he's got to place his water order at the start of the year, and he'll be given the days when he can water, and then he's got to plant his crops around that. There's this, there's no hope for change. When he gets water, when that flips around to him having water on demand for the crops that he needs at the time he needs it, then he goes to higher value crops, and he works the system to get the water when he needs it. So as that change is being made, there's a real gap in sort of that agronomic, irrigation scheduling, agronomic services to assist those farmers, because it hasn't really been, it's just been a forced methodology of how you produce on farm.
Yes.
And we are seeing that as a big gap in the areas we're working, even in developed countries. As you move to a more automated water supply network, the skill set for that agronomic advice is a requirement. So
providing people with more sophisticated decision-making tools, is that a part of it?
It is, but also the whole agronomy advisory services. So people that understand crop science, that can interpret the data to tell a farmer who's not educated when's the optimal time to irrigate, when's the optimal time to apply fertilizers, how to maximize the crop. So that as the networks change to providing possibilities on farm,
yes,
that's a big requirement.
Thank you.
technological ability are growing exponentially as well. I mean, digital agriculture is taking a boom. Is how we educate people and train people in such a short period of time as well. That is the constraint. I mean, time is the essence. I mean, we can upskill the people, but it takes time. And my view as well is the climate changes that we've got nowadays are really abrupt, and you need to be very reactive. And that's a major difference as well. It's the time scale where all these changes occur that we need to be reactive, and sometimes, I mean, it's just time is missing. We've got the technology, we can upskill people, but it takes time.
To work in a much more agile way, yes.
Yeah. And just a quick one from me. I agree with both Bruce and Jean-Philippe, but I think what I notice on the ground with a lot of projects that I've done with the Asian Development Bank and World Bank, the projects are done at that high level. And I did witness that fracture between that high level and the ground, so to speak, the people who are going to be affected by our changes. So in all of these, I've spoken both, obviously, to both organizations. So we need to go to the people. So we managed to bring Chinese counterpart in our specialty that obviously know the culture, and then create that link through them by running, actually, if you want, we call it here stakeholder engagement or community, and really do it even on their culture, around, like, I don't know, a drink or some food around the table for those, and go to their farm, go to their places, and tell them about, what it means to them. So I think that's an important one, like, just to add to what John, Philippe, and Bruce were saying.
Thank you. Virginia, how are we going for time now?
I think we've probably almost reached the end. I was just going to make a comment that, a lot of the farms in China are very, very small. They're little subsistence farms. I'm just wondering, Fuad, from what you've experienced, is there work being done to amalgamate a lot of those farms to try and get to increased scale and productivity?
Well, my understanding is they are small, but they work within what they call cooperative. So those small farms are part of a bigger corporation that they work through, and they trying, I guess, the system there is top-down type of thing. So there are certain regulation as to how they cooperate and how they can work in a bigger scale to have the improvement sort of, retain to everyone. But yeah, I must admit, there are limitations there.
Yeah. So that'd be how the news or the innovation would filter down. It'd come from the top. Oh, thank you for that. And look, and thank you so much for moderating a terrific Q&A there as well. I hope everyone's enjoyed the questions today. A very special thank you to CSIRO for the partnership together that we have, and thank you also to Jean-Philippe and Fuad and Bruce for really covering such terrific conversation together today. I've just lost my speaking notes. That's what happens when you open up at the screen. It's really interesting that I think we do say at ACBC that we will really achieve a lot beyond the political rhetoric that's on at the moment and the dialogue that is happening in relation to issues of contention. And we'll do this through business. And I think, the three of you speaking today are actually showing how scientific research and actually getting on the ground and doing business with China is really beneficial, and it benefits both countries. And I think we can, then continue to have close trade and investment ties through this sort of interaction. So congratulations to all of you on the work that you're doing. I'd like to thank everyone behind the scenes who's pushed the buttons, Maddie and the team, and everyone at CSIRO who's helped bring this event today to you. We're looking forward to the next partnership series, as I mentioned earlier, on alternative protein sources. So keep an eye out after Christmas for that one. We've got a session coming up on Friday, which is in relation to health technology, and also one where we have Dr. Yongcheng Chang from the Chinese Food and Drug Administration also speaking early December. So keep your eye on our website for those two things. We've also got the Victorian Commissioner to Greater China, Brett Stevens, who'll give us a nice wrap up for the end of the year on the China market from his base in Shanghai. So a few things to look forward to. we'll send out information to you following this event, along with a summary of the recording. So please keep an eye out for that one. And I do look forward to seeing you all next time. And again, to our speakers, Bruce, Fouad, Jean-Philippe and Anne, thank you so very much for sharing your thoughts today and your time, and very much look forward to seeing everybody again soon. So thank you again.
Thank you, Virginia. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.